Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at the Plenary Session 1 titled Towards Peace by Peaceful Means, Peace Forums, Peace Institutes, and the Construction of Peace. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jeju, and it is truly a great honor and privilege to be leading you through this session. Before we begin our session, it is my pleasure and honor to now invite Mr. Kim Kyung-hak, the chairman of Jeju Special Self-Governing Provincial Council, to deliver his congratulatory remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the chairman to the stage with a very warm round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, and dear participants joining us on-site and online, good afternoon. I am Chairman Kim Kyung-hak of Jeju Special Self-Governing Provincial Council. I would like to congratulate Jeju Peace Institute for hosting the session of Peace Forums, Peace Institutes, and the Construction of Peace under the topic of Towards Peace by Peaceful Means. President Ha In-taek of the Jeju Peace Institute and the staff members have worked hard to organize this event. I thank you all. Here in this session, we have Chairman Ha Young-sun of East Asia Institute as our moderator, and also Project Coordinator Isabel Prinzing from Basel Peace Forum, Secretary General Fabienne Hara of Paris Peace Forum, Director Henrik Ordal of Peace Research Institute Oslo, Director Dan Smith of Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and Research Department Director Im Hae-yong of Jeju Peace Institute have joined us as speakers. I would like to thank all of you. Now, the entire world is facing a huge turning point. The US, China, and Russia are competing for hegemony, and the situation on the Korean Peninsula is unpredictable as well. Long-held order of peace and prosperity is developing a crack. Peace is a process. Structural violence under the pretense of peace cannot be justified nor legalized. Peace is important not just as an end, but also as a means. Peace should be attained by peaceful means. The Constitution of UNESCO declares that since wars begin in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. There might not be a perfect recipe for peace, but there are better ways to get there. We indeed face a solemn, heavy task, but for the irreversible peace, we have to work together for coexistence and cooperation. Having gone through April 3rd incident, Jeju realizes how important regional peace is. After the Second World War, amid the ideological conflict of the Cold War, innocent Jeju residents got sacrificed, which is truly a tragedy. Historical pains have been overcome in Jeju by peaceful means of reconciliation and coexistence, and now Jeju is writing a new history showing how we can resolve past historic issues in a good manner. Now, in its 17th anniversary this year, Jeju Forum is one of the most appropriate venues to discuss peace as a means. After starting off under the name of Jeju Peace Forum in 2001, it has led cooperation and coexistence for global peace. Key figures from around the world have participated to discuss issues in Northeast Asia and the world, and the forum has established itself as a venue to discuss regional peace and common interests. In particular, the Jeju Peace Research Institute, established in 2006, is playing a major role for peace and prosperity in Northeast Asia. By presenting research results and expanding research network, the institute is growing to become a global think tank that spreads the message of peace throughout the world. We are living in a globalized world. As we can see from Jeju Forum and the Jeju Peace Institute, regions are expected to play larger and larger roles for greater peace. For the peace and the safety of the international community, Paris Peace Forum, Basel Peace Forum, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, and Peace Research Institute Oslo are playing a big role, and we are joined by representatives of these prestigious organizations. I hope that the experiences and activities that will be shared today can help us renew our direction toward global village of peace. Peace as a means can get even stronger when we work together. Coexistence and cooperation are the best means of peace. I hope we can find a way to coexistence and cooperation to overcome conflict and march toward peace in this session. Thank you.
Time out to open our session and for eloquently setting the stage for the following discussion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to introduce the moderator for this session. Dr. Ha Young-sun is the chairman of the Board of Trustees at the East Asia Institute and Professor Emeritus of the Seoul National University. With that said, I would now like to hand the floor over to Dr. Ha.
It is my pleasure to moderate the plenary sessions on the role of the peace forums and peace research institutes for the construction of peace. Our discussion topic this evening is very much timely under the current global and regional security situations. Right after the end of the Cold War in 1991, we dreamt of the peace and prosperity over the world. However, we are now seriously debating the possible realization of new Cold War in the near future. It means that the role and the future of peace forums and Peace Research Institute is very much critically important. In that sense, the session invited the 5 prominent experts from the global famous Peace Forum and also Peace Research Institute. Let me introduce the 5 panelists for our discussion. First, Ms. Isabel Frinzing, Project Coordinate, Basel Peace Forum. Second, on June, Ms. Fabienne Harwa, Secretary General, Paris Peace Forum. Next, Dr. Hellik Urdal, Director, Peace Research Institute, Oslo. And next, Mr. Dan Smith, Director, Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. He's now on the Zoom. And last but not least, Dr. Lim Hae-yong, Director of Research Department, Jeju Peace Institute. Because of the time limit, we will have 5 presentations only for roughly 1 hour and 10 seconds. I think we have to rush the sessions. During the first round of the presentations, each speaker will, I hope, that will summarize the basic positions in no more than 10 minutes. So I would like to turn to the first speaker, Ms. Isabel Frinzing. Ms. Isabel Frinzing is now head of the communication at Swiss Peace Practice and Research Institute for Effective Peace Building. She is also the project coordinator of the annually held Basel Peace Forum. Ms. Isabel.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to represent the Basel Peace Forum today. It is held, as the name suggests, in the lovely city of Basel in Switzerland, an annually held 2-day conference in January, which was initiated by Swiss Peace, the Swiss Peace Foundation, a practice and research institute, as has been mentioned before, that is dedicated to advancing effective peace building and which has been founded over 30 years ago. In the last 30 years or more, as you all know, Switzerland, among others, have done a great deal to promote peace. But if we take a look at how the world is at the moment, there have been repeated setbacks that challenge everything that has been done for peace building. So armed conflicts and political instabilities in many parts of the world led us to ask the question whether or not we should tackle the theme of peace in new ways. So this is why in 2017 we initiated the Basel Peace Forum. Its main vision is to bring together people from various backgrounds, so across sectors, connect across sectors, and therefore bring together people that would otherwise maybe not meet. Because we believe that maybe non-traditional actors could also play an important role for peace building. Let's say, for example, an artist that is drawing attention to social injustice, or an urban planner trying to rebuild a destroyed city after an armed conflict could also play an important role in peace building. This is why we try to connect people from various sectors at the Basel Peace Forum. We want to inspire innovative ideas by them sharing their experience and knowledge and find creative and innovative solutions for peace building. Last but not least, we also are trying to enhance the visibility of peace building and of related topics, mostly in Switzerland, but hopefully also beyond Switzerland. So our milestones in the past few years have been, since the first Basel Peace Forum took place in 2017, that we expanded into various topics. We managed to get some core funding, which also helped us to gain some financial stability, which is also important for a conference and an institute like ours, as you can imagine. And quite eventful, the last 2 years, they were quite eventful, because in 2021 we organized an edition that has been completely virtual, and last time we tried to organize a hybrid edition, and as you might imagine, this provided us with a lot of new opportunities, but also a lot of new challenges. One of the opportunities, of course, was that we were able to reach a lot more participants than in previous years. So in the last 2 years, we managed to reach over 500 participants joining online or on-site in Basel with just a click maybe from wherever they were. We're, of course, a very small forum compared to Paris or compared to Jeju, but we're quite happy with the amount of participants that we have every year, because it also allows us to have very interactive and enriching discussions with everyone. At the Basel Peace Forum, we invite every participant to also share their knowledge and expertise, and I believe that everyone benefits also from each other's experience and the shared stories. Regarding to our topics, we try to broaden the spectrum of the traditional peace-building topics by showing that peace and conflict are not like isolated topics that happen in a country or in a place very far away from Switzerland, but that they are also linkages that are of importance to other elements or other topics that are discussed in society in Switzerland and in Europe and maybe beyond that. So that's why we try to broaden our own horizon and trying to link peace and conflict to other topics such as artificial intelligence, or we discussed how cities could also be agents for peace. As you can see in this graph, we also believe that innovation does not happen overnight. That's why we That's why we constantly develop and reshape our core questions of each topic and discuss them year after year. But we're also not afraid to take on new topics that we think might be of interest to us and to our audience. Our participants, they are mainly from academia, politics, diplomacy, civil society, arts, and the business sector. And I brought you some images that you can have a look at what it looked like in the past. With the Basel Peace Forum, we believe that we can contribute to peace and to peace building by enhancing the visibility of peace building in Switzerland and the related topics, by showing these linkages between peace building and other important topics, and by developing new ideas and solutions, by forming new partnership among our participants, and by also serving as a platform for new and upcoming experts who maybe did not have a loud voice before, but used the Basel Peace Forum as one step in drawing attention to their issues. And of course, we hope to do so in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It's very informative introductions. By the way, do you have many Asian participants for your forum?
Asian participant. Yeah, last year we had a violinist from South Korea. Yes.
But most of them are coming from European
Yes,
countries.
I think it changed in the last 2 years, where we were also able to connect speakers virtually from wherever they were. So we also had people from Nepal, New Zealand, Australia, the Philippines. But yes, the people on site are, due to logistical and financial reasons, mostly from Switzerland and Europe.
Okay, next speaker will be Ms. Fabienne Hara. Ms. Fabienne Hara, in January 2022, she was appointed as Secretary General of the Paris Peace Forum. She has held the leadership and advisory positions in global think tanks such as the International Crisis Group and the Council on Foreign Relations. I would like to invite Ms. Fabienne Hara through the Zoom.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Greetings from Paris, where the Paris Peace Forum is based. Greetings to you all. Thank you so much to the Jeju Forum for the invitation. I'm very pleased to be part of this meeting today. One of the strategic objectives of the Paris Peace Forum is to bring together all the key actors in building peace in a broad sense, and also in boosting and renewing global governance. And so in that context, I'm extremely interested and enthusiastic to participate in this meeting and to be de facto part of this network of peace actors and peace fora. Thank you so much. Perhaps a couple of words on the Paris Peace Forum and its history. But I should start by saying that the next edition of the Paris Peace Forum will be in November in Paris on the 11th and 12th November. And that, of course, we would love for all of you to participate in the next edition. This will be the 5th edition of the Paris Peace Forum, 11th and 12th November. And the title of this, I'll come back to this in a second, is Riding Out the Multi-Crisis. So we have a very rich program to offer. So perhaps a few words about the history of the Paris Peace Forum and the mission as well. This is a forum that was born in 2018. If you remember the context of 2018, we were already in a difficult geopolitical situation with a lot of fragmentation, but also mostly challenges to multilateralism, especially with the rise of nationalism, some nationalistic attitude. If you remember the discourse of Mr. Trump, America first, and retrenchment from a number of global institutions such as the UN, but also in the European Union, we had Brexit and challenges to the stability of the European Union. And so the idea we had when we created the Paris Peace Forum was that the system, the current multilateral system, was unable to produce good political governance on big issues, big global issues, such as common goods, for example, oceans, protection of the environment, climate, outer space, most of the global commons, but also the changing domains such as technologies. The rise of technologies had received little attention in terms of governance. Of course, the posture of the forum was very much in support of the UN and the global institutions, the global multilateral institutions, but we also recognize that the geopolitical competition was intensifying. We saw it on the Security Council in the case of Libya, in the case of Syria, that it was very difficult to produce resolutions, consensual resolutions. Also difficult for the UN to associate non-state actors. So as much as we are in support of the UN system and currently very much in support of our common agenda that the Secretary General released last year in 2021 at the 75th anniversary of the UN, we also believe that there needs to be a complementary forum and platforms to reinvent and strengthen multilateralism. And also, because of the context, some new norms are very unlikely to end up in binding treaties. It's very unlikely at the moment, with everything going on in the world, that states will agree on new treaties. So what we thought is that it would be important to offer platforms to discuss the emergence of new norms, to discuss how to structure these new fields of governance, and so that this normative discussion can actually go up the chain as far as possible. Our chairman, Pascal Lamy, has a good expression to express this. He says that norms have 3 different states, from gaseous to liquid to solid. And the Paris Peace Forum works in the category of gaseous norms and liquid norms, but of course, hoping that they can transform into solid norms at some point. So that's the idea. And over the last few years, we've developed really this new practice, I would say, that we are crafting a new kind of diplomacy, multi-actor, multi-stakeholder diplomacy, and very much centered around common goods. So the diplomacy of common goods is something that we do. So the methods of the Paris Peace Forum, perhaps a few words on this. We are really trying to bring actors from the north and the south, from the east and the west, foster dialogue between them. So a very inclusive way of doing multi-stakeholder coalitions, multi-stakeholder meetings. We boost on-the-ground governance projects from all around the world every year. We have a call for solutions, a call for projects, and then we select some of them and we showcase them and we scale up some of the selected projects very much. And we create large-scale coalitions on specific issues. And of course, hoping that these large-scale coalitions, very inclusive coalitions, will, as I said, have an impact on the normative behavior of some of the key actors and some of the key experts. And of course, these coalitions, I will give a few examples, are growing very, very fast. So in the last couple of years, we've also decided to incubate some policy initiatives and create our own coalitions. And I give you 2 examples of that. One is the Paris Call for Trust and Cybersecurity, Security in Cyberspace, which was initiated in 2018, around 9 principles to safeguard the internet. And it's now a 1,200 member strong movement, including 80 governments, 800 companies, 300 civil society groups, including in the Global South. It has developed concrete tools for cybersecurity. And I'll give you the second example, which is more recent. It's 2021. and it's called the Net Zero Space Initiative. It was launched to manage space debris, and it was based on this observation that outer space debris was not governed as a governance field, and now it has really provided attention to this issue, and we have perhaps a very, very quickly growing coalition of space agencies and industrial companies and states that have signed up to this new initiative. So this was just to give you an example. And I will conclude by saying that, of course, it's fantastic and really useful to focus on global governance, but we have also the challenge of the crisis, geopolitical crisis, growing into multiple dimensions. We had COVID in the last few years and a big setback to SDGs in particular, and now, of course, big consequences on the socio-economic situations of a number of countries, including countries with lower income. And now we have a new geopolitical crisis, which has accelerated the debt crisis, the food security crisis, and so on. So we are, to a certain extent, we have to absorb these new challenges into the governance issue, and we have to broaden, I think, again, the definition of peace to include all these various dimensions. And I will also perhaps conclude with a more sort of technical challenge that we are facing. We are coming back this year, this edition, Riding Out the Multi-Crisis, to a full presence meeting in Paris in November. And by the way, the full presence meeting have gathered a lot of people. I mean, we've had perhaps 15,000 participants in the last few years, including 140 heads of state. But it's a challenge because we're coming back from online editions and hybrid editions in 2020 and 2021. I don't think we are the only forum facing that challenge. But of course, this is going to be a test, a reality check and a test to see if people will be able to come back from this online life that we've all been living in the last few years, and also with the very acute conscience of climate change growing, will people fly and take the plane to come back to Paris? We very much hope so, but this is certainly something that we are wondering. Thank you.
Thank you. One quick question. In upcoming November, will you have some representatives from Russia?
We have not invited official representatives from Russia. No. We will remain, however, open to Russian civil societies and Russian non-official actors. And we have Russian NGOs, and especially in the space and also in the cultural domain, that continue to be part of our bigger network, but no official presence this year.
Thank you. I would like to turn to Dr. Henrik Urdal as the next turn. Dr. Henrik Urdal is a director and research professor at Peace Research Institute, Oslo, PRIO. He is also past editor-in-chief of the journal Peace Research and a former research fellow with the International Security Program at Harvard Kennedy School. Dr. Urdal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ha, and thank you to the Jeju Peace Forum for facilitating this dialogue, and to the Jeju Peace Institute for organizing this panel. Very much appreciated. I thought I'd start with a few words about the genesis of my own institution. And first and foremost, PRIO is an academic institution. We are not considering ourselves to be a think tank, as we do not have a political agenda that we're pursuing, but we produce knowledge on peace and conflict, and as a main output, produce and publish our work in academic journals and academic books. PRIO is a non-profit private foundation, so we own ourselves. We're not affiliated with the government or with any university, but we have a strategic collaboration both with universities in Norway as well as abroad. But even if we are an academic institution, we do have a very strong mandate to ensure that our research is being made available to the policy community as well as to the general public. And this is something that we strive for through a number of different outreach activities, such as publishing policy briefs, organizing open meetings, participating in the Paris Peace Forum and the Jeju Peace Forum, as well as engaging, of course, with media and the general public. We also make all of our research openly accessible, open access on our own web pages, including the posting of all data that we use for our analysis. PRIO is an old institution. We are more than 60 years, established back in 1959. This makes us one of the oldest peace research institutes in the world. At the outset, PRIO was a rather small institute with between 8 and 10 people and limited resources, and now we count more than 140 people, including researchers, support staff, PhD candidates, MA students, as well as international guest researchers. We have a situation where we're developing research projects for external funders. As much as 85% of our income is competitive every year, so we have to be innovative and think about what our research contributions can be, and we're engaging both with Norwegian and international funders. We have 5 different research departments and 15 different research groups spanning across these 5 departments, and we have on top of that 6 different research centers. We are multidisciplinary, ranging from political scientists and economists and geographers to anthropologists and historians and philosophers. And we have very international staff. Almost half of all our staff are non-Norwegian, and many coming from conflict countries, including several of our PhD students. So before discussing PRIO's approaches to peace and to peace research, I would like to underscore that it is particularly important in today's world, in which both fake news and alternative and non-scientific narratives are so prevalent, that research institutions step up to provide fact-based input to political processes and the public discourse. It also follows from this that researchers, in my view, have a responsibility for addressing the major challenges of today in our domain, and this includes issues like the increasing global rivalry between major powers and the resulting threats to multilateral rule-based world order, respect for democracy and human rights, climate change, migration, and nuclear proliferation, and I will be getting back to some of these shortly. So how can we understand peace? And this is also part of what the challenge for this panel is. PRIO is working broadly to try to understand the various dimensions and contribute to understand the various dimensions of both peace and war. And we are a large organization, so I'm not going to be able to give full credit to everything that is going on at PRIO, but I will address some of the central ones. We also have web pages where it's possible to look up some of the topics that we're working on. In a conventional and narrow sense, peace is the absence of violence, of violent armed conflict. And it is possible to monitor and observe the levels of violence in society. And PRIO has for a long time been involved in major data collection efforts to document the level of violent conflict globally. First and foremost, this is something we've done through our collaboration with the UCDP, the Uppsala Conflict Database Project in Sweden at the Uppsala University, which is producing the most important and most used data set on armed conflict anywhere in the world. Data is being collected on various types of conflict and the number of people killed, and this allows us to track developments over time. And more recently, there's also been a development where the UCDP is pinpointing each and every violent conflict event in its exact geographical location, allowing us to study conflict dynamics much more carefully. And we also collect data on other forms of violence, such as urban social unrest. This kind of systematic data collection and data analysis has for a long time been one of the major PRIO trademarks, addressing both the general causes of conflict as well as its consequences. And in the same domain, PRIO studies the international security architecture, its actors and practices. We study nuclear proliferation and use of artificial intelligence in war, including development of autonomous weapon systems. But it is important to also broaden the scope of inquiry beyond what we sometimes refer to as negative peace. Fundamentally, this includes investments in human development and institutions that foster more peaceful, inclusive, and collaborative societies. So in addition to these more conventional approaches, we also research nonviolent movements, asking when nonviolent action is successful in bringing about change. We have extensive research on inclusion, including gender perspectives and levels of inequality around the world. We have programs on migration, understanding the various factors that both drive migration and what the consequences are of migration movements for the areas both that the migrants leave and the areas where they arrive into. And we have research on mediation and dialogue, what it takes to bring different groups to the table, and how you foster dialogue even around fundamental disagreements. I've further been asked to say something about how PRIO is working for peace and what our contributions are to the promotion of peace. And this is a very pertinent question. What is the practical relevance of academic work for the real world? And since we are an academic institution, we do not engage directly and practically in conflict resolution or peace building, but we try to produce knowledge that can be the foundation for political action, and sometimes apply our research directly into political processes. But this means that we have to translate our research so that policymakers can understand and appreciate what we do. And also that we have to apply research in ways that allow us to address major political concerns. And our most successful endeavor when it comes to engaging research in a demanding policy setting is the work that we do at the PRIO Cyprus Center based in Nicosia in Cyprus. And this is a so-called Track 2 initiative, and where we don't take part in the actual negotiations between parties, but we produce knowledge about the situation on the ground and facilitate dialogue between the sides discussing these facts. We're also using a couple of other examples, using advanced statistical models and text learning to create conflict prediction and early warning systems. We're collaborating with the UNDP in Colombia and Notre Dame University in the US to collect data on the peace process in Colombia to try to inform the implementation of the peace agreement. We publish a Gender, Peace and Security Index, which is creating a lot of stir every year and contributing to putting gender and gender equality on the international security agenda. And we're engaging with the IPCC, the climate panel, where several of our researchers are contributing to the reports of the IPCC. And these are just some of the ways that PRIO as an institution tries to convey research to those in power. And it's how we attempt to infuse political processes with research-based knowledge. And I think, as I said, it's important that research institutions are stepping up and offering to produce knowledge that respond to the challenges of our time and ensuring that policymakers have an evidence base for their decisions, whether they wish to make use of it or not. I'll end on that note.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Among peace researchers in Scandinavian countries, we are rather familiar with Stockholm SIPRI in Sweden and PRIO in Norway. If I ask the questions, what is PRIO's special strength in comparison with SIPRI? Could you respond to that?
I can say what PRIO's strength is, and I think we have a very good working relationship with SIPRI, and of course Dan Smith, who's following me, has also been the director of PRIO, so we have a good exchange of people between the institutions as well. PRIO has had a very strong academic tradition. But I think we share the ambition of SIPRI when it comes to making sure that what we do makes a difference also for those who are in power and have the possibility to do something on the ground. And that is important for PRIO, and I believe that is also important for CIPRI.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker will be Mr. Dean Smith. Mr. Dean Smith is the director of the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, CIPRI. He has researched and written on security, conflict, and peace for 4 decades. He served 4 years in the UN Peacebuilding and Advisory Group. His most recent book is the 10th edition of the State of the World Atlas. Mr. Dean Smith.
Thank you very much, Dr. Haar, and thank you to my friends and colleagues in Jeju for organizing this forum, and congratulations to the other panelists for very interesting presentations. I think the key question for us to be thinking about, the core question, which has been put to me in the course of inviting me for this occasion, is really, what have we done for peace? And it's a tough question to be asking and answering at a time when we can see that the international environment is really deteriorating quite seriously. And this is a long-term deterioration. It is not simply a matter of the war in Ukraine and the crisis over Taiwan. The deterioration has been going on really effectively since 2009, 2010. We've seen the number of armed conflicts, the number of people who are killed in armed conflicts, the number of refugees, all double during that period of time. And we've also seen world military spending rise in 2021 to above $2 trillion US dollars, which is the highest level that it's ever been. So this is a tough time for the world. It's a tough time for us engaged in peace research and peace activism to be thinking about what our impact is and could be and has been. And of course, beyond those challenges that are perhaps most directly into the world that peace research has traditionally looked at, we also have the broad areas which other panelists have also referred to already. Climate change and its impact upon human society, the broader environmental crisis, like climate change, the product of human activity, but now having enormous impacts upon our well-being in many places. And of course, the risk of a future pandemic. And one of the questions I think which is of concern is how is it possible to be protecting and enhancing the international cooperation that is needed to address the challenges of climate change, the crisis in the biosphere, and the need to prevent and perhaps respond to the next pandemic. How is it possible to enhance that cooperation in today's atmosphere of geopolitics? So the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute was founded a few years after PRIO. Its foundation date is 1966. And there's a couple of things which are important to us straight away in the name. It is the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. And so although we have always received generous funding from the Swedish government, amongst others, we are not Sweden's International Peace Research Institute. We are independent, and that independence is very important to us. And the second word in our name is international. We have 29 nationalities on staff at the moment. While most of the operations staff, those who manage and administer things at the Institute, are Swedish, the vast majority of the remaining staff are not Swedish unless they have been here long enough that they've taken out Swedish citizenship. There are 9 members currently of the governing board, and on that governing board, 9 different nationalities are represented. By convention, there's only ever one Swede on our governing board. Now, when we were set up, it was quite explicit that we were to be based in science, thus doing research, but speaking to policy. And the twin strands of our DNA over the past 56 years of our existence have been, on the one hand, close attention to the evidence and to the facts and trying to present those in the clearest, most systematic and reliable way that we can manage. And at the same time, wanting through that to be contributing to improving the prospects for peace and disarmament. Unlike PRIO, I think we would happily say that we are a think tank, and we would equally happily say we are not an academic research institute. But we're not a think tank with a policy agenda. That's to say, we do not have a specific policy program. You can read out from the range of our research interests the issues that we think are important. And I'll come to that in a moment. But we don't have, in the way that political or party think tanks do, a specific policy agenda. For us, I think the most important part of our our traditional identity and our feeling about ourselves is to do with facts. It's to do with evidence. Alva Myrdal, Swedish politician and diplomat, who was one of the driving forces behind the foundation of CIPRI, had an insight when she was looking at the disarmament negotiations in Geneva in the Committee of the Conference on Disarmament, and recognizing that many delegates literally did not know what they were talking about because the evidence was not available to them. And yet the delegates of the USA and the other great powers did know what they were talking about because they had the evidence, but it was kept within government circles. And so for her, it was important to, in a sense, democratize the discussion of disarmament in international arenas by making more evidence available. And her husband, Gunnar Myrdal, a Swedish economist who became the first chair of the governing board, he summed this up in two simple words. He said, facts kick. They have an impact, in other words. So CIPRI has for a long time provided basic data on military spending, trade in major weapons, arms industry, on armaments technologies, for example, weapons of mass destruction, outer space, cyberspace, artificial intelligence uses in the military sphere. We provide basic data, the largest single database on peace operations in the world. That provision of the data and the evidence is the starting point for us in a way. Because then what we go on to is to unpick complex issues, to try to open them up so that they can be understood by non-specialists. And to begin with, I think the focus there was very much on the technical questions. What really are these weapons? What can they do? What are the difference between different kinds of weapons? Why does that matter in a negotiating context? You look back into what CIPRI was writing about these issues 50, 60 years ago, and you see this attempt to make the technically complex a little bit clearer, a little bit easier to understand. It's moved on in recent years as we have broadened our understanding of what is required in order to achieve peace and security, to include social questions that people have also been talking about already, and indeed now the relationship to the biosphere. Thus, climate, gender, governance, inequality, and food security are, alongside our more traditional issues, very important parts of our overall research lineup. Now, providing knowledge and unpicking complex issues is one thing. We go through what we hope is, what we do our best to ensure is fair-minded analysis of these difficult issues towards supporting not only public understanding of these questions, but also supporting policymakers. For example, we've worked closely with successive members, elected members of the UN Security Council on the issue of the relationship between climate change and insecurity. So that started by working with Sweden when it was a member of the UN Security Council, then with Germany, now more recently with Norway and with Ireland in particular, and we're setting up a relationship going forward with new members as they come in, as they get elected. And at the same time, also supporting practitioners to better understand what the impact of their work is and coming with ideas about how improvements where they're needed could be made. We work quite closely with the World Food Programme, with the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, and with the International Committee of the Red Cross, amongst others, on these kinds of questions, supporting them with evidence and analysis and ideas. And on the basis of that work and on the basis of the reputation that we've built over half a century, it's clear to me that CIPRI also has a considerable amount of convening power. So every year we have two major events. One is the Stockholm Forum on Peace and Development in May. When we were online, as Fabienne was saying earlier on, there was a much greater broadening of the constituency. And we had over 5,000 participants at the Stockholm Forum in May of 2021. This year we went live, we went hybrid. I can tell you that doing hybrid events is a complete pain. I congratulate anybody who takes that risk, but I warn them that it is more complex than it seems and more expensive. But we were fortunate. We felt we had some 700 or 800 in-person participants, and we still kept maybe 2,000 or 3,000 online participants. And then every November, just before the Paris Peace Forum, we have a much smaller event, but still we think an important one, the Stockholm Security Conference, which is the 8th to the 11th of November, which this year will continue as an all-virtual, all-online event, with the focus on the theme of battlefields of the future. And then, in addition to those larger events that our convening power makes possible, we also have been involved for some years in much smaller, quieter dialogues, which we don't talk about the details of, although we do acknowledge that they are continuing. So one has involved Iran with different counterparts in the US and in Europe. Another one has involved North Korea. And I've worked particularly on that in the last several years. We have developing dialogues now in the Gulf region of the Middle East. And also, of course, because of the Ukraine war, we have I'm not quite sure what number track to put on it, a pretty high number, I think, far away from formal diplomacy, a track 2.5 or 3 dialogue with Russian counterparts. So those quiet dialogues, they go on out of sight, and we will continue doing them. But we regard them as being as much a part of our work as a research institute and as a Center for Peace Research as the published research that we do. So thank you very much for this opportunity to explain a bit about CIPRI, and I'll leave it there. Back to you, Dr. Ha.
One small question about CIPRI. Would you respond to that question rather briefly? What was the golden time of CIPRI, if you look back the history of CIPRI, more than 50 years?
I think the golden age in one sense is now. CIPRI is larger than it has ever been, covering a much broader range of issues, and is a very lively and dynamic research community. But I think that going back in the past, there are 2 real key achievements that we think about. One is that, or maybe 3. The third one that I just thought of was the background work we did for the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal. That we did during some very difficult times from 2002 through until 2015 when it was signed. We did a lot of important background work for the International Arms Trade Treaty that was signed in 2012. And further back than that, researchers at CIPRI were a driving force in bringing the the threat of biological weapons, biological and chemical, but especially biological weapons, to the forefront of international thinking. And that very much helped achieve the Biological Warfare Convention. So those would be the ones that I would pick out in particular.
From my point of view, the reason I asked the question was that the golden age of CIPRI was the golden age of the Cold War period. At the time, well, CIPRI was one of the most brave research and could produce some kind of alternative path we can think about. Anyway, well, next we will listen to our last speech by Dr. Lim Hae-young.
Thank you for having me in this wonderful session with excellent moderator, Chairman Ha, and speakers from the world-class Peace Forum and Peace Research Institute. Actually, the President Han of Jeju Peace Institute, who planned this session, actually not only this session, but also the entire Jeju Forum, he planned. And he always wanted to have this kind of dialogue, conversation between Peace Forums and Peace Research Institutes. So let me take this opportunity to talk about how Jeju Peace Forum and Jeju Peace Institute started and how these two institutes have contributed to bring peace and prosperity in Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. Let me start with a short history of Jeju province because we need to understand the history of Jeju in order to know why and how Jeju Forum and Jeju Peace Institute was created and evolved. Jeju is a special province in South Korea in that this is a self-governing province as an island, and also this is its own history of conflict and peace, specifically since the end of the Second World War. The history of Jeju goes back 1,000 years ago, but when it comes to how Jeju has become the island of world peace, the relevant history started from the end of Second World War. Even though the Second World War ended in 1945, Korea domestically, Korea Peninsula was full of conflict between South Korea and North Korea domestically, United States versus Soviet Union internationally, and democracy and communism ideologically. US forces entered South Korea while the forces of Soviet Union entered North Korea. South Korea was very unstable, full of political tensions in every aspect of state building, considering the early age of post the World War II period. Shortly speaking, the tensions started to get escalated before the general election in May 10th, 1948. The conflict burst out in Jeju in 1948. From April 3rd, 1948 to May 1949 or beyond, there was an uprising. People living in Jeju protested opposing to the division of Korea and had been on strike since 1947. The Workers' Party of South Korea, they were supported by North Korea actually, and its supporters launched an insurgency attacking the police. Against this attack, Northwest Youth League, a right-wing anti-communist South Korean paramilitary group, they mobilized to suppress this protest violently. And back then, President Syngman Lee declared martial laws, began an eradication campaign against rebel forces. Many rebel veterans and suspected sympathizers were killed upon the outbreak of the Korean War in June 1950. This Jeju uprising, or Jeju April 3rd incident, is notable for its extreme violence. The number of people killed in this incident is estimated to be 14,000 to 30,000. There was 10% of entire Jeju population back then. The most sad and heartbroken fact is that so many innocent people had to die because of this tragedy, and even many 5 years old, 7 years old kids, they just killed without knowing the reason why the national military forces are trying to kill them. So military historian Alan Millett regarded this Jeju April 3rd incident as the true beginning of the Korean War. Also, I believe this Korean War was the also genuine beginning of the Cold War. Jeju April 3rd incident was not supposed to be mentioned for a long time in Korean society. It was kind of a political taboo. Even writing a novel about it was politically prohibited and criminally charged and punished. Only after civil rule was reinstated in 1990s, the Korean government admitted that the events on Jeju Island took place. A decade later, in 2006, the Korean government, the President Nom Hyun, issued an official apology. The Korean government designated Jeju Island as an island of world peace in 2005, and this designation is a meaningful project relating to the future of Jeju because Jeju has been expected to play an important role in establishing peace in Northeast Asia and in the world, going beyond Jeju. Geographically, Jeju is an optimal place for Northeast cooperation since it is located at the center between Japan and China. It takes 1 hour to Shanghai from Jeju by flight and 2 hours to Beijing, 2 hours to Tokyo. Since Jeju is geographically isolated, it has been a popular place for summit meetings since the late former President Mikhail Gorbachev of the Soviet Union visited for summit with back then Korean President Roh Tae-woo in 1991. There have been 6 times of bilateral or multilateral summit here in Jeju, mitigating the tensions and encouraging cooperation among nations in the region. US President Bill Clinton, General Secretary of China Jiang Zemin, and Deputy General Secretary Hu Jintao, Japanese Prime Minister Keijo Buchi, and Junichiro Koizumi visited Jeju when they were holding the office. Furthermore, Jeju has facilitated the peace and cooperation between two Koreas. In 1998, when the country was in the middle of a financial crisis, Jeju started humanitarian support for North Korea by sending tangerines, which was called the Tangerines of Love. This humanitarian support led to the ministerial level meeting between South Korea and North Korea. North Korea responded to Jeju's amicable gestures by inviting Jeju residents 3 times in 2002 and 2003. In truth, the Jeju Forum and Jeju Peace Institute are the results of Jeju's sincere efforts for peace and prosperity in this region for a very long time. And in response to Jeju's longing for peace, special act on the establishment of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province and the development of free international city was enacted, and Jeju Island was designated as an island of world peace in 2005. By this law, the Jeju Peace Institute was established in 2006 with the joint funding of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. The first Jeju Forum, which was called the Jeju Peace Forum back then, was held in 2001. In this first Jeju Forum, there was an important declaration, also known as a Declaration of Peace in Jeju, confirming that Jeju can make contribution to peace and prosperity of not only Korean Peninsula, but also Northeast Asia and the world by having forums and research institute. In earlier years, the Jeju Forum took place every 2 years until 2009. Since 2011, Jeju Forum is held every year. Jeju Forum is a track 1.5 dialogue where general citizens and government officials sponsor together representing the region of Northeast Asia. Jeju Forum has its unique meaning in Northeast Asia because Northeast Asia composed of South Korea, North Korea, Japan, China, I guess Mongolia. This region lacks security dialogue between nations in the region. Europe has a CSCE, as you know, Conference on Security and Cooperation in Europe, which contributed to mitigate regional tensions, unify East-West Germany, and ended the Cold War. And Southeast Asia also has ASEAN Regional Forum and Shangri-La Dialogue. Northeast Asia really needs a security dialogue like this because military power or economic sanctions are not sufficient to deal with threats to the regional peace like North Korea nuke. The Northeast Asia needs to keep trying confidence building and arms reduction through security dialogue. The reason why North Korea needs this kind of track 1.5 dialogue is this. When intergovernmental relationship got worse, track 1 dialogue just stops or the number of participants decreases sharply. For example, China-led six-party meeting has been stopped, and Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Forum, a Seoul security dialogue by South Korea, has not been vitalized. So when international dialogues are not possible right now, track 2 or track 1.5 dialogue could be a realistic alternative to track 1 dialogue. Furthermore, when it is difficult to discuss issues like confidence building and arms reduction, they're hard issues. We can start a dialogue on issues like economy, environment, and tourism and women. These are related to soft power, and we can proceed to hard power issues. This path could be desirable. Also, there are numerous national institutes in Northeast Asia studying their country's national interests. Still, many institutes, especially private institutes, study the common interests of Northeast Asia. The Jeju Peace Institute arguably may be the only research institute in Northeast Asia that hosts annual security dialogues such as the Jeju Forum to share and communicate research results with the international community. The Jeju Peace Institute specializes in research, peace and cooperation on Korean Peninsula and Northeast Asia. The Korean epistemic community for peace has grown with the Jeju Peace Institute and Jeju Forum. I hope that this session could open the door for more opportunities to work with the global epistemic community for peace. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you. Instead of asking questions to Dr. Lim, I would like to say a small story which might explain the potential of Jeju Island as a good place for the study of peace. I personally like the paintings of Picasso. Whenever I go over to Europe, I spend some time in Malaga, Madrid in Spain, and spend some time in southern shore of France. In particular, after 1945, it was the peak time of the, roughly around the Korean War. Picasso left 2 very much impressive wall paintings, War and Peace. Some of you might know those 2 small wall paintings. One surprising thing, there is a small gallery we call the Lee Jung-sup. He might be called the Korean Picasso, actually very much famous. He left 1 small paintings. When I first saw the Picasso's wall paintings, War and Peace, in particular the paintings of war and Lee Jung-sup's paintings of Seogwipo's dream. Seogwipo means the name of these areas. Lee Jung-sup personally experienced at that time, 1949, 1950s, there was the Korean War, internal strife, as you might know, April 3rd of the Jeju Island. In spite of those, the sad situations, he drew the painting a very kind of the dreaming of what kind of the futures we might dream. But very much similar, those 2 pictures. But fortunately, Lee Jung-sup's paintings draw 1 year ahead. If that painting draw 1 year later, there might be some kind of the future argument over there, because with some unknown Korean painters and global well-known painters in European countries. The story I would like to say, that is the sincerity of that kind of the painters. They are continue thinking about war and peace things, and they finally, although they do not know each other at that time, the final drawings looks like very much similar. In that sense, well, Jeju Island have the very much chances to be a potential well-known peace forum or peace research institute, because as we all know, Korea experienced the Korean War almost, which is the same level of the World War level. And at the same time, in spite of the end of Cold War, we are continuously not yet graduating from the Cold War. In that sense, if the researchers at the Jeju Peace Research Institute seriously consider those two things, I think sooner or later, Jeju Peace Research Institute or Jeju Forum can grow up very much faster and can go along with the Basel, Paris Peace Forum, or the PRIO and CIPRI. I do personally, sincerely hope that future. We do have roughly the 9 minutes left. We have one short second round. Let me ask question in this way. Frankly speaking, I spent a year from 1986 to 1987 at the CIPRI. At that time, I learned quite a lot, in particular the European experience, arms control issues. At that time, I didn't expect, I could not use that kind of arms control experience, European experience. But returning back to Korea, 3 or 4 years later, we began to have a direct contact with North Korean experts on the arms control issues. We finally have a one whole week discussion at this and at the major universities in the United States. We discussed quite a lot. At that time, we used most of the terms I learned from the, frankly speaking, at the CIPRI. For instance, confidence building measures, something like that. So it means that unintended consequences of that kind of CIPRI's work is working in some far from the areas. So today's meeting, I firmly believe there should be some kind of unintended consequences of today's discussion contribute to the solution of the current difficulties, such as the war in Ukraine or U.S.-China strategic competition and the North Korean nuclearization, growing up nuclearization. In that sense, I personally ask the questions that what is your major priority concern in the upcoming next years from your Basels or from your research institute? 2 or 3 minutes. What will be our Basels or our research institute will give much more emphasis or due considerations on these matters. It will give some kind of unintended consequences toward the government officials and the researchers thinking about those kind of topics. So I would like to brief one more round from the Isabel Frenzy.
Thank you. I think maybe one unintended consequence of us all meeting here with regards to organizing the upcoming Basel Peace Forum taking place in January is the realization that we should really create a network of fora and of research institutes dedicated to peace building, because we already started a bit, and giving us this space today also is a next step in enhancing this network. But as I see it at the moment, we organize rather isolated conferences where we should rather have conversations between fora and institutes that are all year round taking place and ongoing, and not just isolated 2 days where we meet and exchange and interact and connect. And also not giving the impression that everyone is kind of reinventing the wheel every month with organizing another conference or another forum. So thank you so much for creating this space and dedicating this time for us to meet and exchange. And I hope this will be a first step and a door opener for more networks and connections.
Thank you. Next turn will be Fabienne Hara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this great question. And it's a difficult one, obviously. I can describe the couple of themes that we will be focusing on in the next few months or so, including, as I mentioned earlier, managing the fallout, of the multi-crisis on populations. And that means that we will focus a lot on very concrete issues like food security, debt relief, the reform of multilateral institutions, climate change, and so on. But these are issues that we have all discussed in this meeting. Perhaps what really we should think about, and following Isabel's comments, is the issue of impact in a very polarized world, very fragmented world with US-China rivalry rising, the return of a very brutal sort of use of force, including by a permanent member of the Security Council that turned against the UN Charter, and the rise of conflicts, as Dan said, the rise of military spending. What is our impact, our collective impact? What is our impact on the broad sense of peace, on peace in all of its dimensions? And perhaps the challenge here, I think, is also to maintain a positive discourse on what peace represents, and on internationalism in general. And we've had a very good period after the end of the Cold War where internationalism was very trendy, fashionable, and where we all had hoped that global cooperation could bring about, the end of conflicts. We are not in that period of history now. And so how do you make internationalism attractive? How do you make global cooperation attractive in a context where we have all these trends that I described earlier? So that would be my questions for all of us. Thanks.
Next speaker will be Halek Urdal.
Thank you, Dr. Hahn. And I think your personal story about your stay at CIPRI and the way that this also shaped your work here is a testament to the importance of global research collaboration and dissemination, because that is exactly what we would like to see through international collaboration, that these ideas are and practical applications are spreading and contributing to make a difference. So I think that was an interesting story. So thank for sharing it. My major concern is as Dan Smith alluded to, the increase in the global conflict that we're seeing now, and actually the number of conflicts in the world now, 2021, 2020, is the highest that has ever been recorded since the end of the Second World War. And this is a major concern. I think the conflict in Ukraine is both contributing to make the challenge greater in the sense of an increasing polarization and increasing sort of lack of will to solve international problems will be a result and will be strengthened by the war in Ukraine, where you get a bipolar world with US-China rivalry as the dominating factor. And that means that we will both miss out of sight, perhaps, all of the armed conflicts that are happening elsewhere outside of that bipolar situation, but also that, as I said, this is a situation that hampers our ability and our political will to do something about major conflicts in the world. And this is, I think, a major concern also because we need international collaboration, we need multilateral action in order to address all of these other important issues, like climate change, like the global inequality crisis, and like migration. So I'll end on that note. Thank you.
Next, from Cypri.
Yes, interesting challenge. And I was certainly going to say something about the way in which I thought there is a risk that armed conflicts will be hidden from view by global geopolitical relations, by the war in Ukraine, by the crisis over Taiwan, rather in the way in which armed conflicts in the global south were hidden from view during the Cold War. I mean, in the 1990s, there was this sense of people discovering armed conflicts, but those armed conflicts had been going on for a long time. When the atrocity, when the genocide in Rwanda hit, and actually the previous year there had also been massacres in Burundi, this was a repeat of a pattern that had been experienced already over the previous 30 years since independence. But it hadn't been noticed before in Western Europe, the USA, the high councils of the superpowers and so on, because of the Cold War. And I worry that we're going back into that area, that kind of era. Two other sets of issues that I think are important now that need thinking about and which challenge us both as researchers and in the policy community. One is the question of health. And it might seem strange to be talking about that, but I think that the relationship between, for example, the environmental crisis, human health, and conflict has not yet been thought through properly. And I think it needs to be. The second is more generally, we need to get better at thinking about and explaining some of these complex interactions. Climate change and violent conflict, climate change is driving violent conflict in some locations. Climate change and violent conflict together drive food insecurity. Food insecurity itself also drives conflict, and all of this can make it hard to handle the impact of climate change. So these circular feedback loops and interactions need to be better explored. And then two last questions, which I will put out that we also need to be thinking about. These are maybe more the kind of things that we would be discussing not in research conferences, but in this kind of networking approach that Isabel was talking about, and which you've given us the opportunity for today. One is, after what has happened in the last few years, what is the standing of international law now? If you look at what the British government is thinking of doing about Brexit, if you look at the attitudes that the last American president and maybe the next one bring into office with them, if you look at what President Putin has done with international, what is the standing of international law now? That's one topic. And the other one is, how do we restore the urge for cooperation? Not just the instruments of cooperation, but the urge to cooperate. And how do we do that in an era of growing nationalism and narrow focus in national politics in so many places? So those would be the issues which I think are coming out, are confronting us, that we don't quite know how to handle, and that we need to work together to think out how to handle. Thank you.
And Dr. Lim.
Yeah, one of my biggest concerns is how to make the Jeju Peace Institute more research-oriented institute. I think we have a good network, and also I think we have a great opportunity to know or have a connection to these world-famous peace institutes and also peace forums. I think the kind of unintended, maybe intended consequence of this meeting maybe we are going to try more to use this network to produce more world-class level research. Thank you.
Okay. Because of the time limit, we did not fully share our ideas and wisdom. However, I firmly believe that we have a very much similar dream and also the very similar research topics. In addition, we badly need to develop the more close network. Next time, if we can meet together, we will have a much more successful sessions, I firmly believe. Thank you very much for 5 excellent presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to our moderator, Dr. Ha, and also our wonderful group of panelists for what was a very informative and engaging session. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes Plenary 1, Towards Peace by Peaceful Means, Peace Forums, Peace Institutes, and the Construction of Peace. As our speakers mentioned, we hope that the Jeju Forum will serve as a catalyst for promoting greater global collaboration among peace institutes and peace forums. With that said, thank you.